if I can maneuver what I do into that employee engagement sphere, not only am I doing what I love to do, but I'm also helping employees in the workplace. I'm helping the company.
So I want to welcome today Mr. Scott Trumpolt. He's an A-plus compensation expert and consultant. He's just actually finishing up his first book, and I'll ask him a little bit about that book during the conversation. Mr. Trumpolt, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frank, for having me on your show and giving me an opportunity to address your listeners and your viewers.
Well, it is my pleasure. And as I mentioned to you before, when I saw your description of what you do, I thought, what does compensation have to do with resilience? And then we had our pre-interview and we had a conversation. And so I'm going to launch right into it. And I'm going to ask you to tell me, in your view, how do you view compensation and how do you deal with it to get your professionals, your CEOs, etc., to think differently about compensation?
It's a great question, and it really started happening when I became an independent consultant about 13 years ago. Previous to that, I was in corporate doing compensation planning and design. But when I decided to make the jump into being an independent consultant, I did it for a lot of reasons, primarily to follow my passion in terms of the type of projects that I wanted to work on and to really focus on what I really wanted to do most and to do best so that I could continue my own journey of self-improvement. In other words, instead of trying to focus on management of other people or doing a lot of paperwork, because the higher you climb in an organization, the more you tend to get distance from the things that you really love, the hands-on type of design work that I do in compensation. So what happened to me, though, when I decided to go down this route as an independent consultant, I also thought, well, I've got to think beyond myself here. Why am I doing this? Why am I going independent just to satisfy my own intellectual needs and my own pursuits that I wanted to be in? What is it that really ties into everything I'm doing that is of benefit to everyone? What is the concept? And what I came up with in my mind was the concept of employee engagement. And employee engagement does not mean employees are happy in the workplace so much. Employee engagement means that they are engaged on the objectives that the company wishes them to pursue, and they're very eager to do that because it leads to successful business results. And I thought to myself, if I can maneuver what I do into that employee engagement sphere, not only am I doing what I love to do, but I'm also helping employees in the workplace. I'm helping the company and the stakeholders who are investing in that company, because there's a line between employee engagement, greater employee engagement levels, which benefits the employee, but it also benefits the company in terms of better financial and operational outcomes. So this really became my rallying cry. I said, whatever I do, whether it's designing a new pay structure, whether it is designing a sales commission plan, anything to do with paying employees, the investment, the financial investment that you make in employees, I'm going to figure out a way to do it through the lens of employee engagement. And that started me on this journey that we're talking about here today. And it really does tie into this whole concept that you're talking about, which is not just to bounce back and literally do your job, but do it in a way that is better. It enhances what you're doing in your profession while it's helping others. And then the other tricky part of it was that compensation is something, as people will know out there, it's very much in the shadows. It's kind of in this box, and there's not much transparency to it. And about 5 or 6 years ago, there was this movement that the newer generations were saying, we want greater pay transparency. We want to understand why we're getting paid what we're getting paid to do. And I said, okay, that's a new challenge. How do you talk in a way that doesn't betray confidentiality? And how do you do it in such a way that it helps to foster the idea of employee engagement? And that kind of led me to where I am today and what we're discussing.
Yeah, I really want to know a little bit more about that discussion. I remember when I was a manager and director and vice president and on, no
Mm.
matter how high I went, that discussion with my subordinates sometimes was an awkward discussion. So tell me the way that you have uh, changed perspective, what benefit has that had on that conversation?
Let's get right down to the very basics here. Let's get down to the finite detail here of what this is really all about when I talk about employee engagement. An employee comes into your office, says, I've been here 3 years and I've done a really good job in terms of my performance. That's obvious, it's been documented, and I've received standard merit increases. I'm doing really well at my job, but I don't know where I go from here. It doesn't seem like my pay is going to be increasing anytime soon. A very heart to heart talk with their manager. What if the dynamic has changed and the manager says, look, you're doing a fantastic job in what you're doing? That's an indicator that we need to move your career along. Here is the business need going down the road the next couple of years. The employee wants to feel more part of the business mission. These are the additional skills that you need to obtain. So it doesn't become a one-off, even possibly controversial, contentious, combative type discussion about their immediate pay. The dynamic has changed to this is where you need to move, whether it's laterally or vertically in the organization, and you use career development not as a way to bypass the issue at hand, but to strengthen and accelerate the individual in that organization. And so it's taking that isolated incident, complaint over pay, and turning it into a little bit of a longer term. This is the strategic direction that we want you to follow. If this dovetails with what your interests are, if not, maybe we can find that in another department. But this is the kind of dynamic we need to change. It can't be in isolation. It needs to be a broader perspective, and the employee needs to hear how they tie into the business mission. That's what's missing, is this employee engagement piece. So the manager does not have to be a compensation expert. They do have to understand the need of the business, how the function that they manage contributes to that business mission, and everybody that is on their team has real value, and they need to link that value to a career development path. And those tools can be provided to grow that individuals.
You've touched a number of things we talk about in terms of reframing, looking at the different perspective. We talk about broader benefit, and you began talking about yourself. Where can
Yeah.
you contribute and have produce a broader benefit? And then you look at it from a manager's perspective with a difficult thing, pay, which is really not what they're supposed to be focused on. They're really supposed to be focused on the business opportunities, and indeed hiring the best people and creating the opportunities for those best people to be fully engaged with the business. And in that setting, both the manager, I should say not both, but just all three, the manager, the employee, and the business, they all actually improve and lead towards anti-fragility I think it's a wonderful example, which initially, I frankly, when you said you're a compensation expert, I didn't see it until you did the reframe for me around career development. We're
And
almost
I
at
give,
the,
go
yeah,
ahead,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, go
I
ahead,
wanted to
please.
give you one more specific example, if I could, that might
Yes.
draw the point, just quickly, draw the point home a little bit more. I mentioned earlier about an employee coming in and saying, well, my performance has been good. Once a year, usually a manager will sit with their employee and they will go over they might have what's called a merit pay review, where they review their performance and they say, okay, you're getting a 3% increase this year. And the employee might say, well, geez, I've done a great job. And instead of the manager turning around and saying something deflating, like, well, this is the most I could get for you, the company says we're limited to only 3% increase. Oftentimes, the reason why an employee or the employee comes in here, and unfortunately, employees talk to one another and they find out things and they might say, hey, I only got a 2% increase and so got a 3% increase. What if the manager could turn that around and say, the reason you got less of an increase is that you are already paid above the market value for your job. And you know what that is to us? That is an indicator to us that you are ready for the next step because not only are you a top performer, but you're being paid above the market for your particular role that you're doing. And that's why and it's great that you're doing a great performance, but the fact that you're above market, you should be a great performer. And the next step for you, this is the natural progression for you. And when you do that, you will be getting even more money in the future because you will be in a new higher paying role and it will be reset. So it changes the dynamic from a negative, well, or either this is all we could get for you, or oh yeah, I know, but see, you're overpaid. That is not engaging. What is more engaging is that you are paid well at market, you're doing a great job, and that is an indicator to us that you're ready for the next step and move forward from there. Yeah.
We've come to the end, but I promised to ask you to mention your book that you're working on. So could you just tell us about that as we close?
Yeah, real quickly, it's interesting because the topics that we have been talking about today um, are actually shared in the next book I'm working on specifically. But the book that I do have out, it's not out quite yet. It's in the final stages. It's called The Defragmented Consultant. And what that is looking at providing guidance on a certain way of approaching the independent consultant's life and perhaps a way that draws even more deeply on your prior experience, refining those experiences in a way that's going to accelerate your career as an independent consultant. It's not a personal memoir or anything like that because my life is not that exciting. It's more about providing step by step guidance in a lot of different areas, but through the lens of refining what you've already learned in the past, bringing it forward and making it better, which actually is a little bit of what we're talking about here. Again, it's called the Defragmented Consultant. It'll probably be out in another month or so, but thank you for the opportunity to mention it.